Hello, friends. We are coming up off of a very crazy election day. My dishwasher is doing numbers in the background. My hair looks insane. I haven't even washed it yet. And I really don't like Bronwyn or her man. So, this should be an interesting review. We are here to review the latest episode of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. The ladies are in Salt Lake City still. We are coming up off of Heather's meeting with Braunwyn. I think it was the same day. I wasn't able to fact check that, but I believe it is. And Lisa and Meredith are going to the spa to get a treatment or whatever. And Heather's going to come up there to meet them because she had called Lisa about the whole Braunwyn thing. So she's going to download them on that. Essentially, she gets there and she pretty much tells the story from top to bottom. I feel like she kind of gave every single element of the conversation and every single bit of her perspective as she went along. And then she kind of goes in at a producer standpoint, very obviously, and she's asking both Lisa and Meredith how are they feeling about Bronwyn. Meredith gave kind of like a diplomatic answer, like I don't really know if she's really getting into the whole Bronwyn of it all. I am interested to know. Obviously, just because you have friends doesn't mean that those friends are friends with your other friends. But I'm interested to know because Lisa is like the middle person, I guess, or the common denominator between Meredith and Bronwyn. I'm interested to know what their dynamic is, but I don't think we're getting much of it. Lisa does say that she was upset. We saw this that Bronwyn called her and essentially was like, well, Whitney and Justin are going to be there, so are you going to be good? Like, is there going to be drama? And Lisa's like, it's fine. So she was upset by that because I guess she took it as like there was an implication that she and John were the ones bringing the drama. I don't know that I would take it like that. And without hearing it, I believe that Bronwyn looks at that as checking in on Lisa and being a friend to Lisa. Also, don't know if I would look at it like that. Um, I don't know how I would take it, but I can understand why they have those feelings. Meredith does talk about this conversation that she had with Angie's husband at the event that they had. And I guess there was a situation where he went on some podcast or something like that. And he was saying that Meredith had started all this stuff last season, but she was using her son Brooks to deflect or whatever. And she had from what we saw, a very calm conversation with him, a direct conversation to let him know that that bothered her. And he was just basically like, that's how I feel, and doubled down on it. So she's not really feeling that. So I don't know what really comes from that. We're now getting these like weird jump around scenes before they finally get to Palm Springs. So we get Bronwyn talking to her husband, and he's just very clear that he just doesn't. And it's funny because I was picking up on this vibe from him this episode. Like if you watch my other reviews, I was just like, when are we gonna get more of him? Like I want to see the dynamic a little bit more. And he doesn't seem too personable in my personal opinion. He's having a conversation with his wife. Obviously you always have to attribute that things to they're on reality TV, so maybe he's not comfortable, but to me he just doesn't seem like he's a very nice guy, and that's something that I picked up on at the beginning of the episode. And it's funny where it came to towards the end, but obviously we'll get there. I wonder if that's like some TV magic that they were showing us, but you never know. So we learned that Mary isn't going because she's going to spend time with her son. I don't look. And then Heather's not going for obvious reasons. We get a quick scene of Angie talking with her husband, and she's like, I'm in a weird space with Lisa. I don't know how we're going to come back from it. And she feels like she's giving Lisa a lot of opportunities to be mean to her. I haven't seen that. I don't necessarily agree with that. Like I've been very boisterous about. I honestly just think that Angie's very delusional, and I think that Angie comes from a place of like she idolizes Lisa, and so she has a lot of insecurities as it relates to Lisa, and she projects those insecurities, and as a result, she kind of puts Lisa on this pedestal, and then expects Lisa to put her on a pedestal. But it's all her doing, and Bronwyn does the same thing. So they're both just very weird girls to me, just trying to be in with the in crowd. Because if given the opportunity, mark my words, in later seasons when Lisa is looking like the prime place to be and they want to beef with like Whitney or other stuff like that, they're going to run back to Lisa. It's going to happen. And Lisa said it later in the episode. So just wait and see. We then get a really quick scene of Whitney and Justin, who have just completely turned me off, to be honest. I don't really want to see much of them ever again. Honestly, like, not a fan. But anywho, they're having a conversation, and Justin does highlight, that he thinks him and John are going to be good, but where they kind of lay off is that, John wants him to apologize to Lisa, but he doesn't know. And Whitney answers for him, as I could have suspected that she would. And she's like, well, no, you're not apologizing to her. She owes you an apology. So I think that that's interesting that she would do that, but I think it says a lot about her character, and there's not much to say as it is. And then we get a scene with John and Lisa, and she's talking about, which I'm honestly, I'm enjoying the way that this story is coming together, right? Like I always say, we don't get to see Lisa be super vulnerable, I don't think, but as it pertains to her kids, she does. And like it kind of piecemeals its way out, and you see certain things. You can tell that there's just not really her. Well, it doesn't feel like it's necessarily her personality, but things do. She's one of those people where it's like, well, things do affect her, and one of the things that do affect her is her kids. So this notion that she will be a bad mom is obviously really sticking to her, and I'm sure that it adds to it because she's on this TV show, and when people perpetuate things on a TV show, we get on Twitter and we run around with it. So I'm sure that it adds a lot of layers. There's a lot of forced hate against Lisa, as y'all know. That's my personal opinion. So I'm sure that it starts to affect her, especially if people are calling her a bad mom. That's my personal opinion. So they get on the jet. We don't really see too much footage from the jet at this time. Once they get off, there are two separate cars. Obviously, Lisa and Meredith are getting in one, and then the losers, Whitney, Braunwyn, and Angie, are going to get in the other, and they're going to have their weird one-sided conversations. Braunwyn starts, and it's based on how the election went, I've learned to stop having expectations for what I view as reasonableness. And so watching this episode really took on a different thing for me. So, we're watching it, and initially I started to expect that the viewers would see Bronwyn kind of spiraling out this episode, because that's what I viewed it as. But I didn't really see too much of it on Twitter, and I really didn't look too much for it, because then I brought myself back and I was like, well, girl, look at where we are today on election day. So it's kind of just like, have your own independent thought process and keep it moving. So that's where I'm at. So in my personal opinion, Braunwyn's crashing out, and she's saying that she had a conversation with Lisa and Meredith on the jet, and we get a quick scene of it, and the way that she characterizes it, because sometimes you get a scene of it and then they'll characterize it differently. I'm not even worried about the scene. The scene itself showed me that Lisa was just kind of listening to what she was saying, and she wasn't really giving any pushback. I don't see much from Meredith. And then even when Braunwyn is characterizing it, she says herself that they basically approached the conversation by saying, well, when Heather's your friend, she's your friend. I think we also got a scene of that. And they were kind of having a conversation where it was like, well, if the conversation went wrong, it's probably because this is how Heather is. And, just like kind of explaining to her why it would have gone like that. I don't know why anybody would view that as Lisa was cheerleading for Heather. I do know why people would do that, because people are committed to misunderstanding. But I don't know why any reasonable person would confer that. To me, what I took it as, they were listening to Bronwyn's concerns, and they were saying like, okay, yeah, you guys did miscommunicate, and this is probably why. There was no blame throwing there. So, and then Lisa and Meredith continued that narrative later in the episode when the big fight happened, where they were like, y'all are misunderstanding each other. So there's no blame there. But again, because of these insecurities and this projecting onto Lisa, they want Lisa to pick their side. But I think the craziest part is that Lisa's not picking a side at all. But even if she was to pick a side, it wouldn't be Bronwyn's, and it wouldn't be Angie and her isolated situation, because they're actually wrong. It does take two to tango, and definitely Heather can take some notes. But on the grand scheme of things, in this situation particularly, Heather hasn't done anything wrong to the point where I would be defending Braunwyn against Heather. If I had to pick, let's say this is an election. If I had to pick Heather versus Braunwyn, Braunwyn is like 1,000% in the wrong for me. And Whitney, what I don't like, let's have a conversation, right? Like, we're having the conversation and she's explaining what's said, and I already told you the way that she characterizes it. But Whitney takes that leap and she says, well, were they agreeing with Heather? And Braunwyn says, essentially. And that just never happened. Like, you just didn't hear them say Heather sucks. And so that bothers you. And to me, that's a crash out. Like you're spiraling. They get to Palm Springs. Everybody already seems pretty, divided. There's a side of the house with 2 rooms. There's a side of the house with 3. So we get that same split of like Lisa and Meredith and then the rest of the losers. I mean, the ladies in the group. This is the point, and it's literally in my notes. When the jeweler came in, and Todd had greeted the jeweler. The jeweler seemed a little weird as well. I think she was kind of irritated that she had to do her job. We all can relate to that. But I was just like, Todd just doesn't seem like a very personable person to me. But I was like, I don't know if I want to put that out or not because words do mean things. But again, it does bring itself back around towards the end of the episode. I know I'm edging, but we're going to get there. As far as the jeweler thing went, I understand that we're watching Housewives and want to see the glitz and the glam, even if it turns out to be a little bit ridiculous. So we do get this like 5-minute scene of Angie in the pool trying to get a volleyball while Braunwyn is with this jeweler. But I'm more so focused on, I don't know why this jeweler had to come from LA to Palm Springs to show Braunwyn jewelry specifically for Braunwyn. Like I feel like she and her husband could have done that another time. And then at the end of it, they don't even actually decide what jewelry they want. She said we're gonna, wear both and see which one. So to me, that was just a waste of 5 minutes. And at this point, I'm seeing the divide, so I'm wanting to see the rhetoric on both sides of it. I'm using the word rhetoric. You can tell that the election really affected me. But I'm watching Lisa and Meredith, and they're with their husbands, and everything they're saying is very positive. Like they're not necessarily at that we see. They're not expressing any thoughts on a divide in the group. They're not expressing anything about drama. They're not expressing anything about like, oh, the ladies are over here, we're over here. None of that is occurring. Meanwhile, we keep saying Angie, Whitney, and Bronwyn. They just keep saying things are weird. Things are weird. There's drama. There's drama. Lisa this, Lisa that, Lisa this, Lisa that. My second point where I'm looking for a lifeline in the viewership. Like, do y'all not see this obsession over Lisa while Lisa is minding her business? But again, can't have expectations like that. So we learn that Seth has to leave early, and we get this continuation of a storyline that we've pretty much been getting since the inception of the show. I'm not too tied to it. I'm going to be honest. I like Seth. I like Meredith. I've never really been drawn to them as a couple. I've never really been drawn to their story as a couple. Not that I don't believe that they're a couple. I get it. And I think it is a real storyline. I think there's value there, I guess. But I'm just not really interested. But, it's essentially like, I guess they have been working on spending more time together. We've heard throughout the seasons, and now he's away more, and that's bothering Meredith. She feels like they're moving backwards. So, I guess we'll see if that storyline becomes something. But again, like I said, those losers are, continuing to talk about Lisa. What I will give them a point of is that they're like, let's, break the ice. And so Angie brings out everybody's shots of Vita. So I think that that's fun. I'm looking at reactions. I'm watching body language. Seemed like everybody was still super positive. Everybody meaning like, Lisa specifically because she's the focus. She's y'all's focus. She's the ladies' focus. So she's going to be my focus. And, even when they're in a hot tub, seems like they're having a good time. Everybody's vibing. And, whatever. Lisa did kick off the whole, like, I miss Heather. Has anybody talked to Heather? I wish she was here. And Angie was like, I was going to call her. I don't know what the reason was for not calling her. But they start kind of talking about that. Whitney, of course, jumps in. I'm trying to figure out if I felt like Whitney was trying to egg something on because that's who she is, but I don't want to attribute that to everything because I don't think she does it all the time, but I do think that that's kind of in her nature. But anywho, she's saying, well, it seems like she kind of seems like she's coming from a defensive standpoint because all they said was, I miss Heather. I wish she could be here, and how she kind of came off to me was, well, Bronwyn reached out to her and tried to apologize to her and move forward. So, kind of making it seem like, well, she's not here because of her. That's what I took from it. Because otherwise, why even weigh in? Like, why can't we just be like, okay, we miss Heather and move on? But Whitney, in my opinion, egged on this debate. So it turns into a debate. And the entire time, both Lisa and Meredith are very calm and they keep reiterating, like, well, we know we just miss her, and like that's not necessarily the story that we got from Heather. Like, I think that Heather was hurt by the conversation, but hey, like it is what it is. And Whitney was still kind of egging it on, like, well, no, I think blah blah blah. But it's like, Girl, like, who cares? Like, what is this point that you're trying to argue? And Lisa, thank God, is like, well, Heather's not here to fight her own battle, so let's not even get into it. Like, we could just call her and check in. So at that point, she calls her. And they start creating this whole thing, and we get this dramatic music about Lisa calling Heather and just saying, literally, I miss you. We were talking about you. I just don't understand why that's such a big deal, but they make it such a drama that, if they had done that to Lisa, it would be a big deal. Like, oh, they call her arch nemesis. And it's like, Heather and Braunwyn are not arch nemesis. Like, Heather is an OG on this show. So we're obviously going to have a conversation about Heather. And yes, we called her. Angie just said that she was going to call Heather. Was it going to be in front of the group? No. Okay, fine, I guess. But she said she was going to call her. So I don't understand why making this an issue is a thing. Even when Bronwyn comes back, the conversation is wrapping up. And I'm wondering if this is on purpose, right? Like, because she even asked to Whitney, like, why is this even happening right now? Whitney's like, I guess because you walked away. And I have an issue with that because it feels like Whitney is allowing this. I think we learn from this episode, if we're reasonable, that Bronwyn takes things and she runs with them. And I think that Whitney allowed her to run away with this idea that they snuck to call Heather and be messy while she stepped away when that's not really what happened. And then I look at it another way. It's almost beneficial that Bronwyn wasn't in the group when Lisa called her because it's a little less messy. Like, I called her to say that I missed her, and as you were coming back, the call was wrapping up. Y'all didn't even really have to interact. So I don't know why that's an issue. Now, even outside of that, I can understand Bronwyn, even given all of that. I can still understand her feeling some type of way, but I don't agree with where she took it next. And she goes as far as to basically jump into the ocean. And she's like, well, you are obviously sticking up from Heather. You've been isolating yourself from me in this group. And like now, as soon as I go to the bathroom, you want to call Heather. Like, she feels betrayed by that. And it's just like, how could you possibly be giving it so much? Like, you don't even know the context behind which Heather was called. Like, you don't even know what was just happening. So, what are you talking about? And then she gets into this whole thing where she herself is mischaracterizing what Lisa was telling her on the plane about the Heather conversation. And she's like, well, is it that Heather came to you and told you that I invited her to to my house so that I can argue with her and not invite her to the trip? And Lisa's like, girl, you're putting words in my mouth like I never said that. And Brown was like, well, I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm asking you. Why would you ask me something so absurd like that? The conversation didn't go like that. Nobody even had a conversation amongst those lines. So, like, at this point, Bronwyn is literally trying to egg something on. I don't think it's a TV thing. I think it's a Bronwyn thing. Like, she's obviously truly upset and very just like, she's projecting those insecurities against Lisa. And you can tell that her feelings 1,000% gets the best of her, and she's not a reasonable or rational person. And she just keeps on running with it, running with it, running with it. And both Lisa and Meredith are like, girls. Lisa is actively trying to de-escalate the situation. She even says, let me remove everybody from it and come sit next to you directly. And Bronwyn is still committed to having an argument about it, right? And Lisa's like, girl, I'm your friend. I came as your friend. I miss Heather, so I called Heather. Like, it's not a thing against you. But Bronwyn keeps reaching for there to be an issue. And so I would have taken Lisa's approach. Like, girl, once Bronwyn stormed off, it was just like, girl, like, I don't feel bad. Like I said, right? Like, and Lisa said it, like, I didn't do anything wrong, so I don't feel bad. And later on, everybody's going to be giving me an apology because that's always what happens. So at the end of the day, like, I'm not upset. Like, I didn't do anything. You're committed to being upset. You're committed to arguing with me. If I was Lisa, I'd be used to it at this point. I'm not going to feed into it. Like, you guys can have it. And it's confusing to me because we know what's to come. Like, we've seen the preview of Todd kicking them out. So I'm expecting that Lisa had initiated something, that Lisa was screaming, that Lisa was being loud, that Lisa was being abrasive, all things that she has done. And she didn't do any of that. Like, she's actively trying to de escalate a situation that's not a big deal at all. So what happens next is very confusing to me. And aside from that, even when they're talking about it, the guys are taking bits and pieces. I guess they can't hear the full thing, but I guess Todd can surmise that they're arguing about Heather. And even he comes to the group and says, well, let's just call Heather. Even your husband said, let's call Heather. And you're still committed to having this argument with Lisa about Heather. And you're projecting and you're using other examples of things that you're upset about because you're not really upset about this phone call. You're upset because Lisa doesn't put you on a pedestal that you believe that you should be on because you put Lisa on a pedestal. And then they flip it and say, well, Lisa makes us put her on this pedestal and Lisa makes us stick up for her blindly and Lisa makes us do all these things as a friend, but she doesn't do them back. No, you're doing that because you're licking Lisa's ass. You're obsessed with her. You're in love with her, and I get it. I think she's fab as well. But those are things that y'all do. There's been no evidence in the past, however many seasons there have been, that Lisa is requiring them to do the things that they do. I've never seen it. I know that y'all piece and weave things together and make things happen. I've never seen it. So this is all just clear insecurity. And the flashbacks were even confusing to me because Braunwyn goes into this narrative of like, well, I don't let people talk bad about you while you're not around. It's like, well, she didn't let anybody talk bad about you. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're just reaching for things. Like, Heather didn't say anything bad about you. Like, she said how she felt about the situation. She said the exact thing that she said to you, to them. So it's not a situation where, like, oh, she went to them to talk shit about you. That never happened. So there was nothing to stick up for you for. Like even when she asked, did she stick up for me? Meredith's like, to the extent that she could. Like there was nothing to be yay or nay about. Like we were just listening to Heather say what she had to say. That was it. Nobody said anything negative about Bronwyn. And Lisa's talking about that later too. Like there was no event or instance where I could be like, well, Heather, you're being a bad friend, or Heather, you shouldn't have done this. That wasn't the tone of the conversation. And there's no evidence that Heather has done anything wrong, right? Like, Bronwyn never came and said, well, I feel like this, I feel like this. Bronwyn's whole thing has been, look, I gave an apology to Heather. I don't know what I was apologizing for, but I apologized to Heather in efforts of moving forward. Heather said that. But Heather took the story forward and said, but then you were expecting an apology from her just for the sake of getting an apology. And that doesn't make any sense. So it's hard to go to Heather and say, well, you should apologize to Bronwyn or you did something to Bronwyn when she didn't do anything to you. And you admittedly apologized to her feeling like you didn't do anything to her. You just were apologizing for the sake of apologizing. I'm confused. All in all, Bronwyn just wanted to fight. Like she just wanted to fight. And that's why it just ultimately confuses me when we get to the scene that we've already seen 5,000 times. And, first he went to Bronwyn, Bronwyn's husband, what's his name, Todd. She went to him, he went to him, and he's like, I think that they should leave. Like, either I'll leave or they'll leave. And she even says, like, he can be an asshole, like, straight up. And I was just like, my head kind of blew off. Because I'm like, I was being so cautious not to put that label on him just because of how I was feeling watching the episode. But she's saying it. And I'm like, perfect. He does actually seem like he's a bit of an asshole. And so it's even worse when he goes to John and the language that he uses, saying like, at first he's like, it has to stop or you guys could leave. And then he says, well, Lisa has to stop or you guys should leave. Lisa needs to stop what? Lisa hasn't done anything. Like, she's been minding her business since she got here. And your wife picked this argument with her at the hot tub. And she barely even responded. Not even in an aggressive way. Not even in an argumentative way. None of that happened. So she needs to stop what? At that point, I would have picked my shit up and I would have left. And we also don't have to argue about that. I'll leave. Because I'll tell you a secret. And I hope that Lisa and Meredith were smart enough to know this. Now we're talking TV magic. When we do production, I'll do production. I would have picked my shit up and I would have left. And if I was Meredith, I would have left right with her. Because if we don't have Lisa and we don't have Meredith, this trip is boring. We don't have Heather. We don't have Mary. We're not going to have Lisa. We're not going to have Meredith. This trip will be absolutely nothing. And it will only show that y'all are big losers because for the rest of the trip, you're going to be talking about Lisa and Heather. I would have got my shit and I would have left. So I'm hoping that that's what happens in the next episode. So, yeah, all in all, I know I got a little passionate, but I'm not upset. I was upset the last review. I'm not upset. I feel like this is silly. I feel like Braunwyn is picking fights. I feel like Whitney, even when Whitney went to go check on Braunwyn, like the way that her eyebrows do this when she's listening and she just gets so excited to hear mess and bullshit, it just shows how much of a loser she is and how much of a follower she is. I would bet my year's salary that Braunwyn and Whitney will bump heads at some point. They're not. It's not a real friendship here. This is convenience, and this is just to go after Lisa, and it's stupid. So I'm okay with letting it play out, and I hope that we have some reasonable people out here that can see what happened this episode and what's happening this season. But all in all, I will be here to highlight it for you and take it with a grain of salt. And I'll see y'all.